What's up? My name is Alex Terranova. I am the host of the Dream Mason podcast. Welcome. We started this in 2017 because we wanted to highlight the journey of Dream Masons. There's a Dream Mason in all of us. A Dream Mason is someone who is awake to their dreams and driven by the passion, the purpose, and the desire to turn that dream into reality. We interview athletes, gold medalists, Super Bowl champions, artists, creatives, 8, 9-figure entrepreneurs, spiritual leaders, and everyone in between. And sometimes we even walk them through challenges that they're currently facing. So depending on whether you're catching this as a regular interview or a playing with problems segment, there is something for you, whether you're at the peak of your journey, at the low point of your journey. I look forward to having you join me on this journey. And I hope that this show helps you unleash your inner Dream Mason. What's up? And welcome back to the Dream Mason podcast. I am your host, Alex Terranova. It is January 20th, and it's a pretty big day in America. New inauguration, first female vice president inaugurated. And whether you're happy about these things or not happy about these things, they're new things and they're different. And I am a big believer that change is natural and change is good, and things are always changing. So if we're trying to hold on to things as they are, then you're actually swimming upstream and trying to fight against the current of life. I'm really excited about our show today. This is probably one of the, I don't know how to describe, I don't want to say successful because I think success is independently measured, but one of the most iconic voices to come on this show, somebody who has built an iconic worldwide brand that has impacted millions of lives, and done things that I think most of us aspire to do. So I don't want to spend too much time talking before that, but what I do want to share is um, this space that we get to cultivate here on this podcast is always a space that I want to cultivate for learning, for growth, for expansion. So I hope in this conversation, you really are able to take what my guest brings and actually apply it to your own life. Instead of just hearing it as his stories or his lessons, actually look at how you can apply these things to your life so you can actually grow and start living more of the life you want to live. And so one day you can go on maybe a show or write a book and tell stories and think back to this moment as a moment that something changed for you. My guest today was born in 1935. That alone is very cool and impressive, which means to me he has seen a lot. He has seen the world change in so many ways. And he founded with his late brother Reebok in 1958. He also recently has a book that came out called Shoemaker. He is married. I got to meet his wife for a moment, who helped him get here and assisted us with creating this. Joe Foster, welcome to the Dream Mason podcast. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for the invite, Alex. It's good to be here, and it's good to talk to you, especially on this day, which is a new day for America. Indeed, it is. So good to talk to you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. And you shared with me before we hopped on here, you live in the middle of France, or you're in France right now?
We are in France right now. Yes, we're in, but we're not in lockdown in France because it's the UK that's locked down. So it's difficult to travel backwards and forwards. We normally spend some time in the UK and spend some time here in France. We have a nice property which is right in the middle of France, very
Nice.
quiet. It's a bit like the English Lake District, which is very nice, but there's no traffic here. So you can drive your car very nicely. No traffic, apart from the tractors. So it's a farming area. So we bump into well, not literally bump into tractors, but we meet a lot of tractors when we're driving around. But it's nice to be here. A bit cool, but it's nice. Better than being in the UK.
One of the things that I really relish and admire being able to talk with people that like just simply have more years than I do. One of my saddest things is that I miss my grandparents because I don't have those close relationships with an older generation that I get to learn from and hear their stories. And so I'm always excited to have conversations like this, because you've simply because of years been able to see the world in ways that so many people haven't. And you've lived through, you were young clearly, but you lived through World War II. You saw the various aspects of the Cold War. You saw tons of leaders of many different countries. You've seen countries rise and fall. You've seen, many sicknesses happen in the world. You've seen things like Vietnam. Um, I'm curious how, for you, how the year 2020, what that was like for you and your family, and if there was anything different about it versus like what you saw in the past.
Well, I think that, as you say, I've been around a long time. We've done a lot of things, and I did go through World War II. But when you come to 2020, the one thing that has stopped is travel, because over my life, and certainly through the whole of my existence with Reebok, I traveled I traveled around the world about 3 times a year for 10 years. So I traveled a lot, met a lot of people, and we have a lot of friends. So 2020, what it's done, it stopped that travel. And that's the frustration, really. However, the big thing about it is what we're doing today. It has advanced technology tremendously. COVID may have stopped travel, but my word, technology's improved again tremendously. And we can do what we're doing now. You're in San Diego, we're in the middle of France. And that is, well, thousands of miles. We're probably talking about 5 to 7,000 miles away, and we get a perfect picture. We can talk. When I was younger, when we were doing Reebok, when we set up Reebok in 1958, I mean, I was only traveling locally at first, but then, you in the mid 60s, I'm flying. I'm going around the world. I'm doing things. And I had to do that. We didn't have computers. We didn't have mobile phones. The best thing I had was a calculator. And that was it. So everything had to be done. You could write a letter. You probably couldn't even expect it to arrive, though. And if it did, you were writing your second letter before you got a reply to your first letter. So it may have taken 2 weeks to write a letter, have it sent off. In fact, part of the book explains when we went with a guy called Shu Lang in Philadelphia, and the letters were going backwards and forwards, but there were so many things that you just tripped over because of time. And we're doing this, and somebody's thinking you're doing something else. So yes, 2020 has been different, but what we are in now with technology, it's incredible.
Are you are you hopeful for the future? Are you scared for the future? What's your personal feeling about what's kind of coming down the road?
Never scared for the future, full of hope, full of optimism. That's where it is. And I mean, the one thing about America, and I loved America. I've been going since 1968, and we're traveling in and out and around. And the optimism is always there in America. Wonderful people, full of energy, and that's why I knew I had to go there with Reebok. It's that energy, and it's a place where everything starts that really counts. And when it starts in America, we knew if we did America, it would travel the rest of the world, as it did. If you think of Europe, we think of maybe 20 nations, I think now are in the EU, 27. And they've all got different languages, different cultures. Okay, there are different cultures in the States, a lot of different cultures. Uh, but by and large, you can say this is the same language. So you can get your message across, uh, 370, 400 million people. So, it's for me, it's optimism. And I think America just had a big scare, obviously, which has been quite interesting, quite interesting. But,
Mhm.
you know, in a way, when you think about it, free speech, freedom of speech, there's always a danger in there.
Sure.
But it's more dangerous if you stop people speaking. So that optimism and that market is so brilliant. So yes, for me, I'm optimistic. We've just been invited. Yesterday, we were invited to go to a friend who's down there in is it Montecito, Mo- Santa Barbara, Montecito.
Nice. Yeah.
He's got a nice beach cottage for us to stay in when we arrive. So it's great, and it's that sort of welcoming. I've always been welcomed when I've come into America. So it is for me. Yes, I'm optimistic, and I think the future's good, especially now with technology and where that's going. And of course, most of this is led from the USA.
I love that. I love it. And it's great to hear because I think hearing it, from I just turned 39. And from my life and my perspective, it's sometimes hard to see the optimism. I try to, I practice being optimistic. I try to look for the opportunities and situations. But based on the life I've seen, like 2020 and what's happened in America recently has has made it tough to see some of those things. So I really appreciate seeing someone who has more, you have more of a purview, you've seen more, you have a bigger scope to look through, giving that sharing that hope. Um, you started your business with your brother,
Yes.
and I know. Can you tell us a little bit about like was there a moment where you said we got to start a shoe company? Was it an accident? How did it happen?
Well, the story is quite long, and Shoemaker, the book, is there to tell the story because there are so many stories. You can look on, we'll have only computers, and you can look for Reebok, and there's so many different stories of how did Reebok start. Well, Reebok actually started with it's part of the family. The family company was J.W. Foster, became J.W. Foster and Sons, but that's my grandfather. He started, he made a pair of shoes for himself, spike shoes for running in 1895. Now, that's a long, long way back, much farther than even myself. But and he is credited somewhat with pioneering the spike running shoe. And although the people may have been making spike running shoes, he was brilliant. I mean, he knew how to influence. He knew how that by giving spikes to people who were winning races, that he would get his audience and he would sell spikes. And he did. He sold his track shoes all around the world, including America. We eventually we had an agreement with Yale University with somebody called Bob Wright. No, there's Bob G and Jack and what was Ryan's name? Frank Wright. Frank Wright. Julie's my external hard drive.
I love it. I love the partnership. I love that you're
Yeah.
looking at her and she's giving you what you need and just supporting you. It's great.
She's heard the story so many times that she knows it better than I do. But so it started with my grandfather. And where did he get his idea from? Well, we think, and in fact, we know very well, he got his idea from his grandfather, which is taking this back a long way again. And because his grandfather was a cobbler, he used to repair shoes. Apart from repairing shoes, he also used to repair cricket boots. And I know cricket's not big in America, but cricket boots had spikes in the bottom. And he used to repair those. And I'm sure that my grandfather said, why have you got spikes in the bottom of these boots? And the obvious answer was, well, it gives them grip so they don't slip when they're playing, when they're batting or they're bowling or they're in the field. And I think that triggered something because he was a member of his local running club. And he wasn't a good runner. He wasn't a big guy, but he was sort of halfway down the field on the races. But he made his pair of shoes and he came in a very unlikely second, which was like a miracle. And I don't know whether he was bullied into making shoes for his teammates or whether they persuaded him, but that was the beginning of his business. His business really took off as a business in the 1900s, the early 1900s. And by 1904, he had world records and he had also got many Olympic gold medal winners. But his belly part was the 20s. During the 20s, he supplied almost every Olympic team, the Americans, you name it, he supplied them all. And he had many gold medals. I don't know if you are aware of the film Chariots of Fire.
I don't think I've ever seen it, but I'm aware of it. Yeah.
You're aware of it. Well, Chariots of Fire, there were three English runners, Eric Liddell, Harold Abrams, and Lloyd Burley. And they all won gold medals during the 20s. And Chariots of Fire just immortalized them as gold medal winners, and that was it. But he made those shoes. So he made the shoes that they actually won the gold medals in. He died, though, in 1933. And I wasn't born until 1935. But I happened to be born on his birthday in 1935 on the 18th of May. So my grandmother, I had to be called Joe after my grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I am Joe Foster. My grandfather was Joe Foster. And okay, I mean, 1935, we're just 4 years away from World War II. So what do I remember? bits and pieces, not too much,
Sure.
but I do remember those war years when we had blackout and we could look at the nearest city, which was Manchester, and we could hear the bombs dropping. We could see the flames. Those are memories that you have during that period. But it wasn't until, well, 1945, of course, I'm 10 years old. I know a lot more, lots of things are going on. I don't join the company though until 1952. It would be. I was 17. My brother had joined 4 years earlier. He was 2 years older than me, but he joined early. I'd been to college and spent a bit more time with education. But 1 year of working in the factory, I had to do national service. In America, they have national service at the same. National service meant you had to go away and do 2 years training in one of the armed forces. I went to the Royal Air Force, the RAF. Jeff went into the army, and he went to Germany. And in Germany, he became aware of Adidas and Puma and what they were doing. So when we came back 2 years later in 1955, we find a company that's failing. So we should have been working in Jane Foster's, an athletic shoe company. Not only athletic shoes, made shoes for every sport. In fact, the grandfather started making shoes for all the football teams in the UK. So it should have been a big company, but father and uncle, they just couldn't get on. And to this day, I don't know what their feud was, but they didn't talk with each other. So how do you run the company when the people running it
Yeah.
don't talk to each other? And
Yeah.
we tried our best to get them to say, look, this is what Adidas is doing. We've got to do this. We've got to come on. We've got to do marketing. We must do something. It took us 3 years. And during that time, we realized it wasn't going to happen. The only way out of this was to set up our own company. It wasn't a choice. It was almost something we had to do. It was fate. There must have been something, some DNA in there that said, we can do it.
Mhm.
I was 23. My brother was 25. We were unbeatable. Who could kill us? Nothing could happen to us. You're just totally and absolutely able to cope with that life, and if it didn't work, so it didn't work. It was like, we'd done 2 years away from the family. That 2 years gave us a different perspective on life. And so that was it. 1958, we left the parent company to set up our company, which we started off as Mercury Sports Footwear. And it's in the book that we had a problem with that. But that's how we got to set up our own company.
So thanks. I love that story and how it goes back. It reminds me sometimes that like our simplest ideas, the best ideas are actually already exist and we just have to adapt them, change them, adjust them to make them fit for a new space.
Right.
And I love that what was the success of your family also was almost the demise in the sense of this legacy of shoe wear from a cobbler to the innovation for running shoes, but then your father and your uncle couldn't communicate. And that was like the breakdown. And it had to be like rebuilt by you and your brother. Um, what for you and your brother, what was in building Reebok? What was the biggest challenge or fear that you encountered that like, or what was there one, a place where you maybe had doubts or got scared of what was possible as you were building the company?
I don't think we ever got scared. I think we were young enough at that time to not worry about it. Okay, we had some moments. We had some moments when somebody tried to take us out of business, and we succeeded in getting through that. I don't think we ever thought that we would get shut down, although it was a very serious time. When you have no money, it's difficult, and there are times when you're trying to stretch people out to pay them, and as it goes in the book, and it was a very unusual person that took us to court with this one, but that was probably one of our scariest moments, if we would have a scary moments. Um, and we did have to rely then upon a good lawyer, and by good fortune, we found a very good lawyer, and he was a good lawyer. He worked with me for a lot of the time that I was at Reebok, and we set up a lot of companies with him, and I learned a lot from him. He was really good. But apart from that, okay, we're 18 months into our business when our accountant tells us, you better, you're doing pretty well. You better get that name Mercury registered. And yeah. So I'm thinking, why? He said, well, if somebody else starts making shoes and decides that that Mercury brand looks good, they'll start making under your name and nothing you can do about it. Oh, right. You have to spend a lot of money on court cases proving that you were the first.
Mhm.
So we went to try to get name registered, and I saw a patent agent, and the agent checked this out and said, no, it's registered. Oh, he said, bring me 10. You see, you have to change your name. Well, in fact, they offered the name to us for £1,000. And £1,000 was like probably asking you, have you got £1 million? It's like $1 million in fact. Okay, it's not a big amount today. But in those days, if you don't have anything like that. So we had not. So he said, well, if you can't buy it, you're going to have to bring me some names and we'll check them with the registrar. Said, don't bring me one. I want 10 names. Like, how do you bring 10 names? So we sat down and we got a lot of names of birds and animals. But in 1943, this is during the war, in a race, in a foot race, I'm in an 80 yards race. I won the race and I got the prize. And the prize was a Webster's dictionary. Now, you know Webster's dictionary, it's an American dictionary.
Mhm.
And why? No, we were used to the Oxford English dictionary. Webster's dictionary? I don't know. I don't know why I got it ever. But this was a day when I was looking through. We got the name down and I'm looking through it. I like that letter R. So R, I've forgotten. So I'm thumbing through R and I came across Reebok, RWBOK, a small South African gazelle. That sort of, oh, that sounds good. Put that at the top of my list. Now, this is RWBOK. Had it been the Oxford English Dictionary, it would have been RHEBOK. I think it would be OCK. That would not have been as attractive at all. I'm sure I might have just whizzed past that. But I put this at the top of my list and I went back to the agent and said, look, I need that. This is the one we need because we need to be in love with it. We just need to be. It's got to be our passion. And as it happened, it was the only one that came fully, completely free of any complications. And except for the registrar. The registrar said, well, Reebok, we're going to have to put you in Part B of the register. And I said, why Part B? Well, what's that? He said, well, if somebody comes to me and say they're making running shoes or sports shoes out of Reebok skin, I can't stop them. Oh, however, 20 years later, the registrar came back and said, we've moved you to the A section because everybody now only knows Reebok is a shoe.
There's this is still a big problem when I do business coaching for a lot of people. One of the things I've learned about trademarks and copyrights and all those things is one of the biggest mistakes people still make is they get an idea, they fall in love with it, they start their business, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years later, they realize, oh, I don't own the name or the brand or the image. Someone else already has it. And then
Right.
right, it would be terrifying. Imagine if right, you're like, imagine if you were 20 years into Reebok and then you got sued because someone else. But one of the lessons I learned early was when you get an idea, go look and see if your name and the idea, if you can use it before you get too excited about it. Um,
Yeah.
I
Yes.
want to I want to ask you about, in that time you were developing and now you're looking back, you and your brother were entrepreneurs. You built a business, you became leaders, you eventually ran a company, and I would say you were big business owners, not just entrepreneurs. But when you look back, what do you think made you and your brother successful as entrepreneurs? And when you look back at that, like how could that help entrepreneurs now?
Well, I think you have to have a tremendous amount of luck.
Mhm.
Luck has to be on your side. Yeah. We were in running and we needed America. And going to America, you had a lot of colleges and universities, and they always had coach. And so that was big in America. It was already big. But what happened in the late 60s and all through the 70s, the running category took off. All of a sudden, everybody in America wanted to go running, doing 10Ks, 5Ks, whatever. Running grew, as did the magazine Runner's World. And Ron's World helped the running scene to really grow, and it helped Nike to grow because Nike were in the running scene at that time. So that was a lot that where we were there at that time, that period of time. And later on, there was a period of time with aerobics that really pushed Reebok into the stratosphere. But so what makes it different? I think what makes any difference is that you've got to really look at what you're doing. And if you can recognize the fact that you know the sport, you know the product, you know it well, you've got something that is tangible there. You know it's all, and then you've got to also be willing to know who your customer is, work with your customer, develop the product with your customer. So I started off, as many people do, trying to sell to the sports stores. And the sports stores were saying to me, I've got Adidas, I've got Dunlop. Why do I need Reebok? And I took that question, why do I need Reebok? Why? And they didn't. They were supplying shoes to athletes. They had them on the shelf, but they weren't Reebok. So it dawned on me because we used to go out to race meetings and sell out to the back of the car. And I realized that these are my customers. So it's knowing your customer. And so we were a part of athletics. We weren't just a lot of people in the UK, other people made running shoes but they were footwear manufacturers and they just manufactured a product, but they were not connected to that sport. And I think the important thing is to be connected to the sport right from the point you know everybody and you get a reputation. And we did get a reputation. And our reputation, I think we were fighting well above our weight. We were bringing stuff in and we were doing so good. And people were asking, like, how did you get this? And so people were coming to us and like, can you make us some shoes? Can you? So knowing your business and knowing it well, I think, and then throughout all the problems you can get, and we did get problems, you just got to stick with it. It's knowing that there's a way through. We had a distributor in the UK that unfortunately went out of business. And he was doing our distribution in the UK before I'd managed to build the global side. And he owed us a lot of money. So I had to go down to his place, bring all the shoes back. And then we had to get together and start selling direct to schools, clubs. We just made a big issue out of how do we sell our shoes? And in fact, we got more money for our shoes by taking them back and selling them direct. We got out of that problem, which could have been a really difficult one. If the bank had got to know about it, I think we would have been sunk. But so you look at it and you can see, well, and every problem you get, you've got to find out how can I turn this around to be an advantage. And we had a number of small problems, like athletes. They were writing into us. Well, certainly the wives were writing into us, saying that all the socks were turning blue. And we've been in Lancashire, where we were north of England. It's quite wet, and a lot of people did cross country, so your shoes get wet. We'd had no problem with this leather before, so I went back to our tannery and said, "What's happening?" And they threw their hands up and admitted they had not washed out all the excess dye when they were dyeing the leathers. Oh. So I had to go back to all these runners and I said, look, when you buy your next pair, we'll give you a big discount. I think I said 25% off. It might have been more, it might have been a third off. But what I did do, I enclosed 2 pairs of socks in each reply. You got blue, but they were blue socks. I sent them blue socks. So they couldn't complain that they turned blue.
This is a great, you touched on like when you encountered problems, your attitude was they're an advantage. There's an opportunity here, which I love. And like, hey, we got these complaints. We made good by giving new socks. We also made the shoes better. The other thing you just touched on is how Reebok was always a company that was innovating. Like you started with running and then aerobics came in. And I remember growing up, my earliest memory of Reebok was pumps and Shaquille
Yeah.
and Shaq. I mean, I remember being a little kid and like I was always a big Michael Jordan fan. And obviously Michael Jordan was Nike, but Shaq was Reebok, and you had the Reebok pumps, which was a completely different thing. Nobody else was doing that.
Yeah.
Um, and then now in the more kind of present times, Reebok has really gone into the CrossFit space. And that's the thing that I think all longevity companies find ways to innovate and navigate. It's tough to do the same thing one way forever. Um, but there's something also unique that you guys as a company were always willing to like navigate and shift and change, and weren't stuck in the, well, this is how we do it and we have to keep doing it like this. Um, what was that mindset that allowed you to continue to like, flow and go to the point where you would go, let's pump up the shoe, let's put pumps in the shoes?
Well, the thing is, and with your company, you're either driven by manufacturing, you're driven by the product, or you're driven by the business, the sport that you're into, the end user. We were always driven by the end use. What is it? What do they want? So, you know, being able to change, I think, is something that we were always willing to do. You, you, you I think Adidas were very good in those early days at making a lot of changes. And, we could see that they were making changes to sports footwear. The old football boots, soccer boots were probably overused, were made of very heavy leather. And because, and they were waterproof. It was called kit leather, but it was waterproof. And that's because the pitches, football pitches, soccer pitches in the UK were usually playing in winter, wet, full of mud. So you had to have this type of boot, or they thought they had to have this type of boot to stop the water getting in. And Adidas they started making it out of lightweight leathers. And this is what brings me back to my grandfather, because I knew very little about his business until after we'd started our own business. And we became big enough to start looking backwards, say, what happened? We knew bits about what he'd done, but nothing came from my father or my uncle working actually in the Foster family. We didn't pick up anything. We had to dig back earlier. But he must have done some very remarkable I would say innovations in his time, because he didn't use heavy leathers, and yet he was supplying, as I said, most of the football teams in the UK. I think it was about 90 something teams he had, and that included the big ones. Liverpool, Manchester United, Manchester City, Arsenal, all the big teams he was supplying. But we didn't know that. And so, we'd lost. And it's surprising that gap that we'd lost with my father and uncle being there. But we'd lost that gap. And so it's only on leaving and setting up our own business that we decided we needed to look back and we needed to dig into the history. So I think that we knew then that his success, I would say, was using influencers, being very much involved with the business. And I think that's where success comes in. You must be involved. You can't just be a supplier of a product. You may be good at making the product. You might be a good manufacturer, but unless you have that connection, unless you're in there and you're part of the sport, which in particular happens to be with us, we were in sport, of course, it could happen to anybody. I'm sure it's like your business now and podcasting. You've got to know the whole business. You've got to know where to go and how to get to your audience. You have to know that. It's no good just being able to sit there and talk. Yeah, that's one good thing, but you have to know everything else as well. So for us, we had to know our business. we, yes, our factories, we were in the shoe business, but our business was a sports business. So we were both things. We weren't just making street shoes. In fact, we never made street shoes except now today. Sport influences street. It's fashion.
Mhm. When, that time that I referred to with Shaq and the pumps and Jordans, I feel like, and you would be able to tell me, but I feel like that was a pretty influential and pretty big period of the shoe industry, right? Shoes became, to your point, like style and fashion. It wasn't just, people didn't just buy these shoes to wear to play sports. They bought them to wear and like keep in shoe boxes and sell them later.
Mm.
But I'm really curious about the like rivalry. Because when I think back to my childhood, there was like kind of it feels like it was like Reebok or Nike at that moment of the
Yeah.
80s and the 90s. Did it feel like that? Do you have like you and Phil Knight kind of thinking about each other and trying to outmaneuver each other, or was not even in the space for you?
It wasn't too much in the space for me because I knew that once we got the shoes into America, and we did that by getting a 5-star shoe in Runner's World. In fact, we got 3 5-star shoes, and I had Paul Fireman who said, "Look, I'll be your distributor if we can get a 5-star shoe." And I told him we're going to get a 5-star shoe, no doubt, and we did. We got the 5-star shoe. That set the scene in America. But I knew I needed the company to be American. It's no good me. If we've got Paul Fireman there, you run the company, you run America. And that way I've got the rest of the world. And so Paul Paul did a very good job with the running. Excellent. And it was a guy called Arnold Martinez. I don't know if you've heard of Arnold. Arnold Martinez, who was a tech rep for us down in LA. And his wife, Frankie, she was going to these new classes, these aerobic classes, and with her girlfriends and coming back, and they were full of it. And Arnold was saying, "What goes on there? What is it? What's happening?" Um, and she told him. So he said, "I'm going to have a look at this." And he went down to the next one, and he saw the instructor there in running shoes, half the class in running shoes, and the other half no shoes at all. And that struck him. Now, why don't we make a shoe specifically for aerobics? So we went back to Paul Fireman, told Paul Fireman about it, and Paul saying, "No, come on, we're doing really good with running. Why do we want to start playing around making a few shoes for girls doing some dancing?" But Arnold wasn't put off. He went around the back, had a word with the production people, and he said, "Look, this is my idea. Can you make this soft, love leather shoe that women will love? Maybe 200 pairs." They did. And he got those 200 pairs around and about down there in Los Angeles, mainly with the instructors. And he got Jane Fonda was wearing them in her videos, her fitness videos, and it exploded. It took over. So that was fine. That was going on in America because I knew if we got America, really got America, the rest of the world would be easy. And at that time then, so production, I left that with America. And the idea on the pump, somebody came with the pump, it's their idea, and they came to Reebok, obviously Reebok BNB. And so Reebok worked on and got the patent rights for it and license rights for it. But this is what happens with design. Lots of people have ideas, and it's then those ideas are brought in. We had 2 or 3 different technologies. I think Hexalite was one, and we had different ones. But of course, it's quite low technology. It's not very high technology. It's not so difficult. But of course, to use it and to make it work, you need a volume company. And of course, by that time, Reebok was a volume company. Once the aerobics had taken off, it took the company from about $9 million revenue. I think the next one was $30 million next year, and the year after that was $90 million, and then $300 million, and then I think it was $900 million in successive years. So the growth was fantastic, and mainly driven at that time by aerobics. And of course, then you bring in the other sports products into basketball, and basketball was again very successful. But at that point, it takes a lot of people, a lot of people to run a company of that size. And we overtook Adidas, we overtook Nike, became number one, and we were number one in 1989 when I decided that time for me to retire. By that time, I'd become more of an ambassador, and I was at 35,000 feet, flying to whatever city, being picked up by a limousine, taken to the best hotel, and when we'd go out for a nice meal. But the challenge had gone for me then. I'd gone through this challenge from being nothing to getting us up into a position where we were, well, number one, which is brilliant. And so for me, The challenges were different. Your business is full of lawyers and and accountants. Uh,
When when you look back on building this company and the way it grow like the way it has grown, is there anything that you would have done different or wish you had that you see now in hindsight that you wish you had like learned before that would have changed something for you?
I again, when I'm asked that question, I find it difficult to say I could change anything when you become number one company.
Sure.
When you're number one global sports brand, what do you change? So I don't think I would have changed. I think okay, over the years since, maybe things have changed that we could have done or they could have done differently. I think Reebok seemed to go into a plateau stage in the mid 90s. Um, and then, of course, sold out to Adidas in 2005. I don't think that's been a good fit for Reebok, but Adidas bought the company to grow Adidas.
Mhm.
And that happened. That's right. That's what they put the money down for. They
Mhm.
wanted to get the American market, just as I had done earlier. They wanted to advance, and I think buying Reebok helped them. I don't think we had anything against Reebok. It's just that the energy then didn't stay in Reebok, and I think it just plateaued for a while.
Sure.
However, I think over the last 5 years, they started to realize they have to do something. And they started an archive, which is good because a lot of the stuff I had, in the loft and in storage, it's now all in Boston. And I don't know why it is that when somebody does buy a brand, they just seem to look at it and think, well, we've got to make it we've got to change things. So they changed the lettering and they changed some of the silhouettes. They they used the delta. Now though they've come back to using the original vector and the original lettering, and they make it they telling one message, and I think that's so important that you just keep one message.
Mhm.
It's like Ford. When I mention Ford, immediately in your mind you come that oval disc, and you see the lettering. That's it.
Yeah.
You don't see much else. It forward. And that's what you have to do with a brand. As soon as you start putting different things into it, you confuse people. So I think one of the reasons for Reebok probably not growing is this confusion that's been going on. But now they've put it together again. Even though right now they have the brand up for sale or they're proposing to sell it. And Shaq and a couple of other guys are very much interested in buying it, which would be very interesting. But I'm a spectator to that.
Mhm.
uh, but but I'm still like you asked the question before. I'm an optimist,
Sure.
and I think Reebok's got another life coming. There's no doubt about it. You look back, and people like to look back. People like to look back on, like you were saying, yeah, when you were around, it was a pump and everything was going down. Well, these things come back again.
Mhm.
They don't go around in circles. They tend to go up in a spiral. So they come around again, but on a different level. And I think it's a very interesting business to be in. Let's say the business now is well over 120 years old, 125, I think it is now. If you look at it as a family business, and and it's got longevity. I think it will continue. But would I change anything? Well, as I say, I had left the company by then.
Mhm.
Should I stay on? I don't think I could have stayed on because I'm used to a small company. I'm used to doing things. And when you don't have telephones, you don't have computers, and you're on the road and you're moving, you make decisions. You have to make decisions because you can't pick up a phone and talk it over with anybody. It's your decision. And so I was used to that. I was used to, no, if it needs doing, I'll do it. If it's wrong, we'll change it. But we cannot undo it. Whereas when you've got a lot of people and you've got lawyers and you got accountants and everybody's in packages, no. So running a big company is something else. And at that point, I think for me, yeah, I'd gone through the challenges. For me, there were no real challenges left. I think there are challenges still, but at a different level.
Can I ask you a little bit about family and like personal?
Mhm.
I've thought of
Oh,
this. your wife has been sitting supporting you at different moments of this interview. And
Yes.
what have you, how long have you been married?
22 years.
There you go, 22 years.
22 years.
Yes.
Do you have any children?
Yes, Julie's my second wife.
Okay.
And my first wife, well, I was married before we set up the company.
Okay.
And so she had to go with me through selling whatever a small product that we had to start up the company. And but the task of going through the family problems, of course. Unfortunately, our daughter, she died
Sorry.
of leukemia, and I think those challenges, because I suppose when you're in a business, you have a love, and you have a love for that business, and you tend to be consumed many times. And this one's a challenge because Jean was very much able to travel, but she didn't want to travel. Except that towards the end, when we were really successful and we had a lot of Hollywood stars, a lot of A-listers coming to our tennis celebrity tournaments in Monte Carlo. It was very glamorous, very nice times. But I think that when Kay died, when her daughter died, I think that was a big wrench for her, because she was very close, probably closer than I was, because I was doing a lot of work and a lot of travel. And we took her death in different ways.
Yeah.
And I think that ended our relationship. But unfortunately, since then, she has died, and I got married to Julie, because I think one of the things that I certainly missed on all the time when I was traveling was somebody to be with. Because, you can do some wonderful things. You can fly over the painted desert in California. You can do all these different things. You can see these different things. And I went into the palace at Monte Carlo and met with Prince Rainier, had some champagne, and you come back and, well, I did that. But it'd be nice to have somebody with you, somebody close to you who you share those things with. And that's probably what I did miss. And now with Julie will travel everywhere. We go everywhere together. If you want me, 2 tickets.
What in two marriages with some children, what do you think, if you were, giving advice to people about marriage and business and family and how it all comes together as you look back over the years, is there anything that you would say you learned that we couldn't possibly know when you were younger, but that you look back and that you learned over time?
Well, the only problem is that, yes, I could probably say you should take more care of your family. But then does that take you away from doing the business? And if it does that mean that you don't do the business? It's a bit of a, certainly in those days. I mean, right now, I can talk to you, like we're saying, we're probably 7,000 miles apart. Apart from a bit of a glitch earlier on, we can talk perfectly well. And so you can conduct some business. I could never do that. Even when I was setting up in 1979, 1980, with Paul Fireman, I had to travel. If you don't travel, and the thing is that with Jeff, unfortunately, again, Jeff died just as we'd set up the deal with Paul Fireman to get things going in America. Jeff died, and that gave us another problem. But the thing is that he just wanted to look after the factory. He was happy doing that. Yeah, he didn't want to travel, didn't want to get involved in sales, marketing, anything. Even in design, I used to do most of the designing in the early days. And then we'd bring on a designer, and so it grows. But for me, if you talk about family, I think you need a very strong relationship. If you're going to run a hard, and that person needs to be with you and close to you.
Yeah.
And I don't think we had that. We've got to look at when I got married first time. We're talking about reasonably just after the war, national service. All your friends were together before you did national service. They all went in similar or different times. They all came out, and that group was never there. It wasn't there again. So you came out and you married the girl that you would be with, because national service broke up the normal social fabric that time. And so you get married. And I didn't know we were going to have a factory and I'd be flying around the world. I didn't know, but it was in the blood somewhere and I had to do it. Um, when I say I had to do it, I guess I was driven somewhere to do it. And unfortunately, Jean didn't quite share that, didn't want to travel, but there was no other way in those days for me. So I guess if you can get a very close relationship, it needs to be very close. Otherwise, the relationship is number one and you just work for somebody. It's a job.
Mhm.
I don't think I could ever have just stayed with a job, even though my wife did say, why don't you go and get a proper job? We were struggling in those early days.
I think that's a common, I know when I started my business 6 years ago, the relationship I was in, that was often a conversation when you're struggling at the beginning. Why can't you just go get a job?
That's
Uh,
right.
but when you think it's like we wouldn't have Reebok, we wouldn't have a shoemaker, your book. We wouldn't have tons of other companies if all the people just went and got jobs. Well, right now we just have Amazon and everybody would work for Amazon. Um,
Yeah.
Joe, thank you I just want to thank you that thank you for sharing your story here. Thank you for writing a book so you leave behind a legacy for people to read about it. Um, Thanks for sharing like some vulnerable things about your daughter and your ex-wife, and letting your current wife Julie partner with you and be here with me. It just feels very it's nice to be with you. It feels very genuine, very real. I really appreciate your knowledge and your wisdom and your willingness to share.
Well, that was one of the reasons for writing the book, is that you get a lot of people making statements and
Mhm.
they're guessing at something. It, People need to really feel the pressures, the problems, the energy, what drives it, what's the motivation, not just, well, something started here, somebody did this. No, this is how it started. This is what we did. And it's almost blow by blow, piece by piece, that you can put together a journey. And I think for me, if people get the right story, if people learn from that, and we've had a lot of nice responses to the book, and it is doing very well. So thank you for the invitation.
Yeah.
Yeah, to talk about it will only spread the word, and I've got one mission left in life now, I guess, and that is to make this a #1 bestseller.
Nice, beautiful. The book is called Shoemaker. People can buy it anywhere, right? Anywhere and everywhere they can find the
Yeah.
book.
Uh,
Um, and if people want to like read more about you, do you do? I know you have an Instagram. Do you do social media? Is
yes.
that a
Oh, yeah. Yes. Well, Julie's brilliant at it. And I just need the stories, and Julie can do that. We do social media. We do Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitter, and LinkedIn. LinkedIn's been very good for us.
okay?
When we first announced the book, we had over 320,000 hits on it, of which 12,000 were from New York itself.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I'll put all of the links in the show notes for anyone that wants those exact links. I'll put all the links to your social media. Um, Is there anything else you feel like you want to share or say to, the listeners who are wanting to improve their lives, wanting to have better relationships with family, wanting to grow businesses or start businesses? Anything else you want to kind of end on?
Well, I think apart from the fact when they listen to our conversation, they'll pick up something. I think to get the depth of it, if they read the book, I think in the book you get my life and you get the lessons. And uh, we have had people write in and say, "I'm going to change my business." I'm doing it because they picked up something from the book. So I think just reading the book, there's there are many books. I know that Phil Knight, his book was a very good book, Shoe Dog, and I like that. And there's amazing amount of things that we seem to share because he had to go to the Far East, I had to go to the Far East, so we do share a lot. And we hadn't met, so we hadn't exchanged notes. So whatever Phil Knight thought about to put into his book is so genuine, just as what's in my book is genuine. And yeah, there are many more things in life than what is in the book, there are many, but you have to have a travel. I had to have people look at my book and tell me, this is what you need to do. Just tell the story. Even though, because when I started writing the book, I'm going this way and I'm going this way. This happened and this happened as well. So, and I think though that what we got into the book was the story of Reebok, my journey.
Beautiful. Did you say, I just have to hear that again. Did you say you and Phil Knight have never met?
We've never met. No.
That's extraordinary. That seems like impossible almost that you two could have never met or crossed paths. That is.
Well, I certainly met with Jeff Johnson, who was his right-hand man. And Jeff Johnson was the man who thought of Nike and who thought of the swoosh. So Jeff Johnson was there, and I met him at an exhibition. I think it was at the NSGA show in Chicago. But wherever Phil Knight was, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things you either bump into people, and there's quite a bit of opposition, like you say. Well, I buy Nike or I buy Reebok. You don't often come together and say, well, but no, I never met Phil Knight. One of these days, you never know. I think he's in Palm Springs or something like that these days.
It's just extraordinary that, I don't know, there's something not being in that circle. It would be like, I don't know, if you told me that Tiger Woods and Michael Jordan never met, even, right? Different sports, different things, but you'd be like, of course they had to meet. Well, Joe, thank you again for being here. I did want to thank your wife too for supporting us and helping make this happen. To all the listeners out there, I really hope you got value from this. I know there's value for this, and share this with a friend. Share this episode with a friend. Tell somebody about the book Shoemaker, and know that somebody's made a lot of the mistakes or had a lot of the successes that a lot of us don't need to have or could learn from. And we can leapfrog some stones and actually help ourselves by learning from people that came before us and did things that are likely much bigger and more challenging. Joe, thanks again for being here. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Alex. It's been a pleasure. Really has. Thank you again.
And we will see you next time.
Okay, anytime.
Thanks for listening. Honestly, I'm just a rebel who found a cause and has a dream, and I'm super grateful for your support. If you got anything from this, please help me out and share this podcast with one person today. You can find me at thedreammason.com or at inspirationalalex on Instagram. You are a dream mason because your dreams don't build themselves.